The finding that there is a substantial genetic component to our behavior should not surprise us. Indeed, it would be far more surprising if this were not the case. We are products of evolution. Among our ancestors, natural selection indubitably exerted a strong influence over all traits that have figured in our survival. The human hand with its marvelous opposable thumb is the product of natural selection. In the past, therefore, there must have been varying forms of the hand, with natural selection favoring the version we have today by promoting the spread of the genetic variants underlying it. In this way, evolution ensured that every member of our species would be endowed with this supremely valuable asset. Behavior, too, has been critical to human survival, and therefore sternly governed by natural selection. Presumably, our enthusiasm for fatty and sweet foods evolved this way. Our ancestors were ever pressed to meet their nutritional requirements. Therefore, the propensity to take full advantage of all energy-rich foods, whenever any became available, was of huge benefit. Natural selection would have favored any genetic variations that ensured a sweet tooth, since those with it survived better. Today, those same genes are the scourge of everyone who struggles to keep off the weight in parts of the world with abundant food sources. What was adaptive in our ancestors is now maladaptive. Ours is a strikingly social species. It is logical, therefore, to infer that natural selection once favored genetic adaptations facilitating social interaction. Not only would gestures like smiling have evolved as a means of signaling one's state of mind to other members of the group, but presumably there would also have been strong selective pressures in favor of psychological adaptations, permitting one to judge the intentions of others. Social groups are prey to parasitism. There are always individuals who seek to benefit from membership without contributing to the general good. The capacity to detect such freeloaders is vital to the success of a cooperative social dynamic. And though we are no longer hovering in small groups around one fire, roasting the communal supper, our gifts for sensing one another's moods and motivations may nevertheless come from those early phases of our development as a social species. Since the publication of E.O. Wilson's Sociobiology in 1975, evolutionary approaches to understanding human behavior have themselves evolved, giving rise to the modern discipline of evolutionary psychology. In this field, the search is for the common denominators of our behavior, human nature, the characteristics shared by all of us, whether New Guinea Highlander or Parisian, which we seek to understand trait by trait in relation to some past adaptive advantage conferred by each. Some such correlations are simple and relatively uncontroversial. The grasping reflex of a newborn, for instance, strong enough that a baby can use its hands and feet to suspend its full body weight, is presumably a legacy from the time when the ability to cling to a hirsute mother was important for infant survival. Evolutionary psychology does not, however, limit its scope to such mundane faculties. Is the relatively low representation of women in the mathematical sciences worldwide a universal fact of culture? Or might eons of evolution have selected male and female brains for different purposes? Can we understand in strictly Darwinian terms the tendency of older men to marry younger women? With a teenager likely to produce more children than a 35-year-old, might such men be seen as succumbing to the power of evolutionary hard-wiring that urges each of them to maximize the number of his offspring? Similarly, do younger women go for wealthy older men because natural selection has operated in the past to favor such a preference? A powerful male with plenty of resources. For now, any answers to these questions are mainly conjectural. As we discover more of the genes underpinning behavior, however, I am confident that evolutionary psychology will migrate from its current position on the fringes of anthropology to the very heart of the discipline. For now, the power of genes to affect behavior is more evident in other species, whose nature we can actually manipulate using genetic tricks. One of the oldest and most effective of those tricks is artificial selection, which farmers have long used to increase milk yield in cows or wool quality in sheep. But its applications have not been limited to agriculturally valuable traits like these. Dogs are derived from wolves, possibly from wolf individuals that tended to hang around human settlements, looking for a scrap, and thereby conveniently assisting in garbage disposal. It is thought that they first laid claim to the title of man's best friend 10,000 years ago, roughly coinciding with the origin of agriculture. In the brief time since, the anatomical and behavioral diversity engendered by dog breeders has become literally a thing to behold. Dog shows are celebrations of the power of genes, with each breed effectively a genetic isolate, a freeze frame in the spectacular feature film of canine genetic diversity. Of course, the morphological differences are the most striking and fun to consider. The fluffball called Pekingese, the enormous shaggy English Mastiff, which sometimes weighs over 300 pounds, the stretched-out Dachshund, the face-flattened Bulldog. But it is the behavioral differences that I find most impressive. Of course, not all dogs within a breed behave alike or look alike, but typically individuals in the same breed have much more in common with one another than with specimens from other breeds. The Labrador Retriever is affectionate and pliant. The Greyhound is twitchy. The Border Collie will round up anything available if a flock of sheep is not to be had. The Pit Bull, as news reports occasionally remind us, is the canine embodiment of aggression. Some dog behaviors are so ingrained as to have become stereotypes. Think of a pointer's elaborate pointing stance. That is no stupid pet trick taught each individual dog, but a hard-wired part of the breed's genetic makeup. Despite their diversity, all modern dogs remain members of one species, meaning that, in principle, even the most apparently dissimilar pair can produce offspring, as one dotty male dachshund demonstrated in 1972 when he managed to inseminate a sleeping Great Dane bitch. 13 great dachshunds resulted. While the basis of most behavior is surely polygenic, affected by many genes, a number of simple genetic manipulations in mice reveal that changing even a single gene can have a major behavioral effect. In 1999, Princeton neurologist Joe Chen used sophisticated recombinant DNA techniques to create a smart mouse with extra copies of a gene producing a protein that acts as a receptor for chemical signals in the nervous system. Chen's transgenic rodent performed better than normal mice in a battery of tests of learning and memory. For example, it was better at figuring out mazes and at retaining that knowledge. Chen named the mouse strain Doogie, after the precocious medic, in the television show Doogie Howser, M.D. In 2002, Catherine Dulac at Harvard discovered that by deleting a gene from a mouse of her own, she could affect the processing of chemical information contained in pheromones